Hello, my name is Adam Feuerstein. I'm the CEO and founder of The Forge. It's a men's organization where we collectively pursue personal masculine sovereignty. Today, in our conversation, I'm so excited to explore this together and talk about everything from success to failure to prosperity to masculine sovereignty to God.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we are introducing a man that you've probably never heard of, but it's going to be the mainstream of what you're going to be doing if you want to create a happier existence. Now, Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, the people that are watching this are obviously meeting you for the very first time, and they would obviously understand that we just don't talk business on the Online Prosperity Show, but we also talk about the people behind the hustle. So, for those that are tuning in today, we've got a guest who is as electrifying as they come, and I mean that literally, and in a metaphor, so to speak. Adam is a man who's gone from rewiring circuits in the construction world to actually rewiring the inner lives of men through his transformative community that he aptly named The Forge. Now, with over 20 years of experience in male-dominated industries and a spiritual journey that has reshaped his life, Adam is here to share his ups and downs and everything else in between. He's all about helping men find their true selves and build a brotherhood where strength meets vulnerability. Now, if you're ready to dig deep and maybe laugh a little or cry a little, you won't want to miss this one. Now, Adam, thank you so much for gracing us with the presence, and congratulations. That's a new studio you've just set up there, right?
It is, yeah, and it's not even close to being finished. We've got to kind of patchwork together today to be able to do this, and I'm glad we got it done, and I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, at the end of the day, everything that is, good is well worth the wait. So we've waited to have you on the show, but I'm happy to have you on the show today. So just let us know a little bit about your journey from obviously managing power lines to now empowering, lives, because this is quite the switch.
Yeah. There's enough puns there to keep everybody interested, so I appreciate that. But I born and raised in Littleton, Colorado, lived there 47 years, and just recently moved into the city here in Denver with our family, including my wife, Michelle, and the last two of our 6 children. But my journey to the work that we're doing now starts 19-something or other, where I began as an apprentice electrician. I did that for a number of years. Got up to where I had a master's license. I started a company, first electric company. I was like 26 years old. Ran it 4 or 5 years, ended up in bankruptcy, lost everything. I took our cars right out of the garage. They drained our accounts and turned off our power several times. That was right before '08. And then, of course, in America, we all know what happened when the bubble burst in housing and development. So there was not a thing to do with my craft. And I mean, literally, there was almost nothing to do. So struggled for a few years, but ironically got into another electrical company, this one much larger, a commercial company. Some friends of mine that I had done business with for a long time had started it. They owned a much larger telecommunications company. They started a commercial electric company. It was failing within 18 months, losing literally millions of dollars. They asked me to come take a look. I did an analysis, and eventually the 3 of us turned it around. I ran that company for 8 years. During that time, after I turned it from near collapse to quite profitable, I bought the company and then turned around and sold it during COVID. In that process, I met my wife about 6, 7 years ago. She came on as a CFO herself. She's an entrepreneur. She ran an accounting and finance firm for 15 years. And we sold her business about 2 years after we sold mine. So we were very fortunate in the position we were in, and they were 2 very successful companies. And so We found ourselves with some time on our hands, and we're still very able. We're young and wanted to find a way to contribute. We have been treated well in this life, and we'd like to pass that along to others. We decided to start with men's work. There's an evolution here, and it's slowly changing, but that's our primary focus in the beginning. And so we talked about this concept of masculine sovereignty. And the reason why we felt qualified to do this is, as an electrician, I'm working in apprenticeship programs that entire time. At one point, my company had the #1 apprenticeship and on-the-job training program in the entire state of Colorado. I've been awarded by Congress, the United States Congress, 3 separate times for our service to veterans and veteran apprentices. So there was this really natural progression and this really obvious observation on my part of the difference in the young men that started in the trades in 1997 versus the young men that were coming in. And the biggest difference was the degree of hopelessness that we saw. And so when I was given the opportunity, and by opportunity, I mean the second half of my life, to contribute, that's what I chose to do.
Absolutely. And congratulations to you and everything else that has happened, because, like I mentioned earlier on, I obviously believe in life. We're here to live, to learn, and to contribute. So in order for us to be able to live the best lives, we need to learn how that is done, and then obviously send the elevator down so we can contribute to those that are also on their way up. But obviously, there's quite a lot that you feed it into this sort of introduction here. To start off with, you went on and started your own business, after having just learned the ropes from other people. How important is it to have leaders or mentors if you're going to be embarking on anything in life?
Well, it's catastrophic. I'm a product of the Colorado State apprenticeship programs. From the day I walked onto my first job site to the day I retired from the industry. And I can tell you that it's everything. And to be clear, the part of the trade we worked in, our men were 5 times more likely every day to die at work than all of the policemen and all the firemen combined. And so there was huge risks that we took. So what that causes, what that creates, is this environment where the guys coming in and they're growing up really have a bond with their mentors. And it's an important bond because it's just not about getting through the workday. It's not about your paycheck. It's not about the recreation you get to do because of your paycheck or the house or any of that. On a fundamental day-to-day level, they're taking huge risks. And that creates a real camaraderie among both the leaders and the apprentices and the people around that industry on site actually putting these buildings together. So it's paramount. It's absolutely paramount.
Absolutely, because the reason why I asked about this is, when you get into a job like that, you probably don't quite know a lot. You're coming in from maybe school or high school, and you have to learn some of the things on the job. So if you've got really good leaders and people that are going to be, showing you the ropes and actually leading the way, it does create that, that need and that sort of discrepancy. Now, are there any sort of memorable leaders that you would have come across that really then made it safe for you to want to really pursue this career? Because as you have said, some people that are coming in that don't quite have that tenacity to want to stick with it.
Yeah, there were. Honestly, I was a pretty lazy electrician. I worked really, really hard to get into management very, very early on. So I only actually worked out in the fields with my hands for about 4 or 5 years. That's about the duration to go through the entire master's program. And then I got into management. And then very shortly after that, I sold my brand new house and moved my family into a tiny bedroom in a basement and started a company. But yeah, so my stint in the apprenticeship was always driven towards management. But what I was able to do is witness a lot of things that went on, a lot of wisdom handed down. Apprenticeships are not new. They've been around for centuries, millennia, depending on circumstance. And so it's not a new practice. People are used to this. We understand it. It's something that comes very naturally. And it certainly comes as a depth of learning when you're in a situation where you're doing hazardous work. So yeah, I was very blessed. I won't mention their names, to have several people that I came in that helped guide me through and introduce me into this trade and understand how things works. But from there, I went straight into management and then into business for myself because that's what I was truly, truly focused on, is wanting to be a leader and wanting to have something of my own that I built from my own doing.
Absolutely. I mean, congratulations on that, and thank you so much for bringing that up, to light. Now, before, obviously, during the credit crunch, you lost just about everything. That must
Mhm.
have also gone with your confidence in that you were actually able to maybe do this by yourself. Would that have been the case at that particular time?
Yeah, that was tough. Without getting into too much detail, the way the laws were in America at that time is in order to have health care, if you had a pre-existing condition, you had to be part of a business, right? We call it a group plan. The reason why that's important is my brother actually is the kidney recipient of my father's donation. My brother had a kidney transplant when he was like 11 years old. So clearly had a pre-existing condition and lots of medications to maintain his health in wake of the transplant. My father was coming up on retirement. He retired early. He's a very successful man, and was concerned that my brother's cost would affect his ability to even retire. And so, as the oldest, I stepped up, and for many other reasons, but that one included, I started a company so that I could provide health care for my brother Daniel. So when I made it 5 years and Daniel enjoyed that health care that I provided, and that company collapsed, I truly, not only did I feel like a failure as a business person, I felt like a failure as a husband, I felt like a failure as a father, and really, truly felt like a failure as a son. Although my dad never, ever blamed me, was only ever supportive. So was my mom. I'm one of these guys who comes from these wonderful families. I don't have a trauma story with my childhood. I grew up literally like picturesque. But yeah, but in wanting to return and reciprocate and contribute to my family, even from my son's perspective, yeah, I can tell you there were night after night after night where I laid in bed, hands crossed in front of my head, praying that God would keep me from breathing because I couldn't imagine waking up the next day. I mean, it was truly, I wanted to die. I didn't want to survive that.
Oh, I can only imagine. And obviously, when family is involved, and especially when there's dire scenarios like that, and only to wake up and there's maybe a foreclosure or a bankruptcy note or some sort of repo on your car, the very means of production, I can only imagine what that would look like. And if there were any witnesses around that also, that just would have worsened the situation. But you bounced back from that, and obviously you went on. You looked into this company, and after 8 years, you were looking after it. You bought it along the way, right? The other company that came after that, right?
I did. It's interesting. Failure in business, if you want to call it failure, frankly, the best thing that ever happened to me was having to go bankrupt. In hindsight, it didn't feel that way at the time because when my friends called me, they were guys I had done business with at my previous company. Even though I had gone bankrupt, my integrity spoke for itself. The way I handled that spoke for itself. And these men were part of that. So even though the business failed, and I'll give you an example. When I went to bankruptcy court, I was met at the door by my lawyer and an armed guard. And I was like, what's going on? And my lawyer's hands were shaking like this. He said, we've never seen a crowd this big in a federal bankruptcy hearing before, and they're all here for you. This gentleman is to escort you into the hearing because we believe your life's in danger. And I was really confused by that. I was like, what? I mean, I know I'm going bankrupt, but really, I need armed security. And my lawyer was just completely freaking out. So they take me down like these, the huge federal buildings, this back hallway, and they kind of navigate me and get me into the room. And I come around the corner into the courtroom, and the courtroom erupts with cheering. Those people were there for me, but not to try to get vengeance. They were there to support me through the process. Those were my friends. And there was many of them in the courtroom. And so I say that as an example of even in the worst situation, when we take a leadership position, we take personal responsibility, right? You don't go in there and say, well, I wouldn't have to do it if it wasn't for that guy, or this guy did this to me, or that person did this, or, whatever. but we just own the reality of our circumstances, which is pretty much our entire circumstance, regardless of the situation. And we take responsibility for that, then integrity has a pathway to shine. And so these men were part of that. And so when their company that they opened with $5.6 million worth of contracts and a few $1,000,000 in the bank, and they developed it and gave it to a president to run because they were busy running a larger company. It took about 18 months before they started to get this gut-wrenching feeling like there was something wrong. But because they had appointed an executive staff, they didn't know what that was. So despite the fact this is in the wake of my bankruptcy several years before that, they remembered and understood that I had, regardless of the outcome, is my integrity. And that's what they needed, is somebody that they could trust to come in and tell them the straight story on what exactly is going on. And so I did. And I had an incredible understanding of the danger that that business and its 76 employees and millions of dollars at stake were really in, because I had failed. Because I had taken a company that would otherwise had done very well and had made a few bad decisions, and then I experienced what that's like for that company to fall. That perspective is number one why I was not afraid of another company that was in literally like mortal danger, the company itself, not the people. And I was willing to take it on. And also my gratitude for those two men. Their name is Owen and Terrence. They're still good friends of mine. I love them very, very much. They are my brothers. Not genetically, and gave me the confidence to go in there, because I knew what failure looked like. I was an expert in these things going down, which means I knew what not to do in order to turn it around. And I took that challenge on. Without that information, I would not have been successful, because it was a very large company, a very complicated company, and it takes a lot of understanding, knowledge, and wisdom to be able to run one, let alone turn one around from bankruptcy.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm already looking at, a crowd full of people that are cheering you on, and you would have already started creating these communities even before you'd actually, really officially wanted to create them, right? Because this, bringing all these people together in your own support, just predicated on the person that you are, it just would have been the next logical step, looking at who you've become today.
Yeah, I've been fortunate, and I give a lot of credit to God. Whatever God people want to give credit to, I don't dictate that, but I know what God means to me, and I give a lot of credit to God, even for the things that I went through that were hard, because those are the things that you learn the most from. Those experiences are what bear the sweetest fruit, per se. So yeah, and because of that, whether it was in bankruptcy or in the success that we had later on, I've always been surrounded by really incredible people, oftentimes without doing anything other than just knowing that those people would show up, that would arrive. And in my life, I can tell you that they almost always have. And so I'm very, very grateful. And again, learning from failure, I really feel like in my own subjective experience, that I have a deeper understanding of how valuable those connections are because of the struggles that I've gone through.
Absolutely. And kudos to you for obviously, rising up to the occasion, because some people would have just been in fetal position, cried, and let everything else just run them over. But they say that travel actually changes you. I've experienced this myself, having moved from, Zimbabwe to Australia, and now obviously, running a business that's profitable and enjoyable. After you sold your firm, the second one, you actually went on a journey, and you were exploring new things, and so much happened for you at this time. How did some of these experiences then shape the vision that you now have today for the Forge?
Well, at the time, I was really focused on letting go of that corporate mentality, right? Like, I mean, my life, the responsibility that I bore was was really a lot. And I don't mean that in contrast to other people. There are people that have much more responsibility than I did. But my life and my identity was really defined by, I mean, if you would have asked me, 7 years ago, who are you? I'd have told you, well, I'm the CEO of this electric company. I mean, what else is there, right? I mean, that's it. And my work ethic, keeps me working in those days, 18 to 20 hours a day. I actually have a record. I've worked 126 hours in 1 week before.
Whoa.
Um, yeah, just like all out. I ended up in the hospital for 3 days. So it turns out that wasn't very productive, but yeah, I've really just incredible. And so to deprogram from that took some time. And I thank God every day for my wife and her support in that. And so you kind of get through this thing. And of course, that transaction, there's fleets of lawyers and fleets of risk assessment people and accountants, and I mean just everybody everywhere. It takes months and months and months to get those transactions. What I mean is the sale, complete, negotiated, and so on and so forth. So that it goes from like being very, very stressful to a whole nother level of stress you didn't even realize, because that entire deal can fall apart, right? Like at any minute, and there's 20 lawyers all trying to figure out how to make it fall apart, in my opinion. So you finally get through that, and then the day it's over with, it's silence. And so you have this really interesting moment in time where you can breathe and you can hear things you haven't heard before. You can see things you haven't seen before. I was very successful as CEO of that company. We had another large influx of cash, of course, when that transaction went down. And so I didn't have to worry about money. Like all of a sudden, I didn't have to worry about money. And before, I didn't necessarily worrying about the scarcity of money, but having to manage millions and millions and millions of dollars with very little margin for error when well over 126 men's lives are at risk every day at work is an incredible thing to bear on top of middle management, executive management, all that stuff. So all of a sudden there's silence and I don't have to worry about money. And frankly, I may never have to worry about money again. So what do you do to fill that void, right? So yeah, we did everything. And I tell people we started out in Honolulu and we made it all the way to East Africa, where I had the incredible experience of walking through the impenetrable forest, a $6 million-year-old forest, and gorilla trekking in the backcountry for like 3 weeks. Just incredible, just these experiences. And I got to have these experiences without my mind constantly finding that next thing to be worried about, like this company or money or employees or presidents or vice presidents or accountants, or all those things that come with it. And so it took a long time to unwind from that. But we did. And I started mountain biking again. I just love bicycles. And we traveled, and like I said, made it to Africa and Mexico and all these places, and just really explored the Western United States, and was able to kind of find myself again. And frankly, we grew some mushrooms in that time. So we took some magic mushrooms for a little while and experimented with that. And if I'm being completely honest, we also found our way into an ayahuasca ceremony. And that was like the pinnacle moment that allowed me to let go of that life and embrace a completely new purpose.
I like that experimentation and taking yourself out of the normal humdrum. It's somewhat of a pattern break, in doing everything that you're doing. So now that you've also mentioned you haven't been in Africa and things like that, just indulge me for a little bit here. See, in our culture, when we are reaching a certain age, like 16 or 13 for the girls, you're called in by the village elders, and then they sort of proverbially tap you on the shoulder and tell you it's your turn to lead. And depending on where you are, you could actually do that gorilla trek, or you could do a lion walk or something like that, just to create that distinction from being a kid to now becoming an adult. And from what you were explaining, this is somewhat of a rite of passage that you had to go through, because your story is all now about letting go of control and literally embracing a greater plan. Now, knowing what you know now, how does this philosophy actually guide the way you lead the Forge?
That's interesting. One of my heroes is Robert Bly. He talks a lot about the initiated or uninitiated males in America, right? And I think that's what you're describing. And he has some stories about some of the way that the tribes in Africa have handled that, and they're just beautiful. I even repeating them, I get very emotional, because it had a huge effect on me, hearing about this initiation that happens where young men, our boys, are granted and accepted into manhood. We don't have that in America. Like there's nothing like that. We don't even think about that, right? Like, oh, I should do something. I should anoint my son as a man today. We just don't do that. We talk about white picket fences, mortgages, and tax bills, which is a whole nother story. But we don't do that. So yeah, I think that's very interesting that you drew that connection. Thank you. I appreciate that. But that was a lot of it, and that's one of the things I learned. Like frankly, from my ayahuasca trip, is I learned the damage and the pain and the misery that I've instilled on people around me, but also myself because of my fear and my hesitation. And coming out of that, it took months to really fully understand the impact. But what I found I found that I found the deepest humility I had ever felt before. I became much more humble. I'm not saying I have it figured out or mastered, but much, much, much more humble. And with that came this strength and confidence that, you know what? I am a grown man and I've done well for myself and I can continue to do that. I can trust the version of myself that's going to get out of bed tomorrow and make a whole nother laundry list of decisions to lead this family further down the road and to give them the things that they need.
And obviously, I mean, it's when you've been through, you can't unsee what you've seen, and you can't undo, the things that you've done for yourself. But obviously, now you're trying to build this brotherhood of men, dealing with, for lack of a better term, fully grown babies that haven't gone through the things that you have gone through, and I believe it can't be easy, trying to explain things that don't have representation in the first world, and people wouldn't understand what that actually means. What's been your biggest challenge, sort of creating and sustaining this the Forge community for yourself?
The biggest challenge, and to put it simply, is limiting beliefs, right? So men who are born in a certain environment feel like that environment inevitably is the summation of their life. This is my dad lived in this neighborhood. He had this job, so I do this. Or I can't see outside of this. And I'll give you an example. We lived in a really nice house in Littleton, okay? And we had some people come over and they cleaned the carpets there as we were moving out of there. 2 weeks went by and we had the same group of people, the same exact people, come to this house, which is in a totally different kind of neighborhood. It's in the city. It's in a very exclusive part of the city. And it looks very different than Littleton. Nothing is the same outside, but of course, my wife and I are the same. And these people came into our home and we knew them. We welcomed them. We shook hands and said, "So glad to see you again." And they looked at us with confusion, like, "Do we know you?" I'm like, "Yeah, you were just at our house 2 weeks ago." Literally didn't recall that we were the same people. That isn't because we're not noteworthy. I think we're very noteworthy. We are. It's because that's how entrenched we become in a given community, in a given part of life, that even our perspective on others who maybe have gone from a certain place in time or a certain neighborhood or location to something very, very different, that our minds are so programmed and into consistency that while we're staring another human being in the face, touching hands, shaking hands, our minds still refuse to recognize that's the same person because they're in this place instead of that place. And I find that fascinating because that's what we run into with men. And a lot of times it's because of responsibility and job and not wanting to take any bigger risk or needing to be a certain way in those communities. We limit that thinking to the degree that accepting a new paradigm, accepting that we can be happy, stronger, powerful, influential leaders in our communities, providers for our families, and ascend ourselves into ever increasing communities where joy, happiness, and freedom are more abundant, becomes so difficult to even conceive.
I can only imagine they were looking at you. They thought they'd been hired by, another wealthy family, and only to their surprise, you actually know them by name, and they're quite surprised now. Who are these people? And or could it have been that we literally, like horse races, we just blinkered to just look and focus on the work, that they didn't even pay attention to who they're working for. They just coming in to do whatever they're supposed to do, and that's it for them, without wanting to know more, be more, and even expand ourselves, for what potential we have.
That's possible, except for we had about a 30-minute conversation about music, guitars, and the Bluegrass Festival that we both were at in Telluride. The most beautiful place in the world is a town in the mountains here. So we're sitting there in our kitchen at the house as they concluded their work and literally talked for like half an hour about this Bluegrass Festival that we had both been at. So not together, we just happened to have been to the same festival. So yeah, and I use that metaphorically, although that story is exactly how it happened, but as a way of limiting to belief. So that's how we see things peripherally, and
Mm.
it's a reflection of our own understanding of ourselves existentially.
I was willing to put my neck on the line for these people, but I've got nothing, Adam. I mean, if you had a 30-minute conversation with them, then there seriously should be something going on there. But you now working with men that are seeking purpose, and obviously that whole personal sovereignty, within the work that they're doing. What's another sort of maybe common struggle that you see among men, and how does your community then address this? The reason why I'm saying this is fish do not see the water that they swim in, and neither can people see the air that they breathe. So many people might be going through, like you mentioned, the picket fence, mortgages, and the whole scenario, thinking that's the stipulated, course of life. Whereas there could be more, like your cleaners that can't fathom the fact that you've elevated in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the approach is really this, is that we seek truth. Our kind of our fundamental philosophy is uh, humility is the pathway to truth, and truth is the pathway to love, right? So be humble in who you are. Be humble in your understanding of who you are, how you show up in the world, and what your gifts are, right? We so often are like shamed because we can't stand up and say, you know what, I'm really good at this, or I really have a passion for this, or you know what, I don't want this 9 to 5 job anymore. This job is horrible. Like I literally die a little bit every day. I want something else. That truth lives in every human being that breathes air on this planet. The question is, can you hear that voice? And I, for one, believe that's the voice of God speaking to the purpose in which he put you here to fulfill. Okay. So we're talking about something, in my opinion, that's very, very important. Again, I don't care which God you blame that on. I just think that comes from a creator. That's my personal belief. And so, how do we hear that? How do we find that throughout, regardless of limiting belief or the conveniences that we face as men, right? YouTube, social media, all these other things that keep us from experiencing lessons in life, discomforts that we learn and grow from, like our ancestors did, but keep us on the couch, keep us subdued, and keep us locked in that limiting belief system. Well, my idea is we choose to be humble. We, through humility, try to find our truth. And when we do that, we require a community for support, because that can be some very, very scary stuff, right? If you've been a software developer for the last 25 years and you have a fancy house and a retirement plan and, new cars and food on the table, but you're dying inside. And I literally cannot tell you how many times I've heard this story. I'm talking men from the outside are the envy of most people on earth and most people in America who have sat at dining room tables with a gun in their mouth because they can't bear the thought of waking up tomorrow and living one more day of misery while they sit in a $10 million mansion on a lake, right? What I mean is people look at those guys and say, oh my gosh, he has this car, he has this, he has this. And the guy is literally dying inside because that voice from God didn't tell him to go buy a $10 million house on the lake. Now, he didn't tell him it's wrong, but he told him there's another way, that your purpose through humility, through truth, and empowered by the love and grace of humanity and from God himself or herself, depending on who you believe, isn't being fulfilled. So it doesn't mean you should be poor either. I truly believe that wealth is a huge advantage in the world, but that has to come in parallel to your purpose. And the difference when men, and so many of us men, good men, choose what they need to do to fulfill their material responsibilities, right? Tax bills, mortgages, credit cards, bigger houses, better cars, food on the table, dress for the wife, wedding for the kids, whatever it is. You know, we find ourselves at odds with that purpose. And in that difference, in that intersection is where we find misery. And it's so hard to break out of that.
But I can only imagine that if you sit around with a few people and just really put things in perspective for them, they actually then start experiencing a profound sort of transformation, because most of the things, like we say, fish don't see the water that they swim in. But if you actually expand the horizon of what they can view, a goldfish that's been swimming in circles in a little pond will lose itself, in an ocean, and wouldn't even know where to begin. So has there been any of those aha moments where people actually start spitting those guns that you're saying they've been trying to choke themselves with, out, and just realizing there's a whole lot more, after they have actually, worked with you or you've spoken to them?
Yeah, and the moments that have happened, and there's a lot of them, but the moments that have happened is never actually a direct result of what I say. I set the precedent, right? I build the stage for us to stand on. But what happens every single time, you can set your watch by it, is when you get them to you get them to think about themselves through humble means to discover their truth, and they start to touch on it and they say it out loud. The moment of transformation starts when they see the reaction from the other men. When they say this thing that they are so afraid to say, something they've known about, even subconsciously, for maybe 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, 6 months, whatever. They've had that, and they finally get the strength to speak it. The transformation begins when the reflection that they get back from the other men is like, yes, we got you. Keep going. Don't stop. Tell us, lay it out, present your truth, no holds barred, no limitation. And that's where that begins, because it's the only place in the world these men go without an expectation. And so they have this opportunity. When you don't have an expectation, dad pays the mortgage, or dad goes to work, or, all these other things that we provide. It's not to say mom doesn't, because plenty of moms do. We're just talking about men. They have an expectation as well, but just staying focused on men, that becomes your whole life. And you have nowhere to go. Your boss has an expectation. Your kids have an expectation. Your wife, your friends, your family, your mom, your dad, everybody. But when you get together with a group of men, that expectation goes away. It creates a vacuum. What fills that vacuum is brotherhood and support. And from that energy, from that infusion of trust and loyalty and support, we can then find our truth, speak it, and realize that it's not wrong. It's never wrong. God's purpose for you is never wrong. It's always right. It's just so hard to get to that truth, and it's even harder to express it.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, you did raise an important, aspect to societal expectations of what, a male or masculinity should look like or feel like or be experienced. And so many people are, obviously following through with that societal expectation. I mean, in Australia, there's statements like harden up or drink a bag of cement or things like that, and it's boys don't cry, things of that sort of nature. Now, the idea of masculinity is actually an evolving subject and modality, so to speak. How does the Forge actually help redefine what it means to be a man in today's world?
Well, the first thing we do is we resurrect nothing. I don't think we need to bring back the 50s male or the 60s male. I think there's no place for that. Okay. We're not trying to resurrect or reinstitute some old school thinking. The world's too exciting. Like, we live in a world with AI. The catastrophic impact to our society from this kind of technology is thrilling, to put it mildly, and it requires masculinity, to your point, to adapt. So the first thing we don't do is say we're here to resurrect, right? It's not like, oh, well, I want to go back to my grandpa's day and we want to, do this again and do that again. That's ridiculous, right? There's no place for that. Nobody wants that. I don't think they did it properly, in my own opinion, frankly. And we're much smarter now. We're much more advanced. We have a much better understanding and access to information to get to know each other, especially between men and women. So we build the entire ideology of an individual. That's what we call it. We call it personal masculine sovereignty. The reason we pursue sovereignty is because it basically fills in all the blanks. Okay, I'd never wanted to start an organization where I tell you how to live. Okay, I don't tell you what God to believe in. I don't tell you if you don't believe in God, that's fine too. I don't tell you who to love, what sex to be. I don't do any of that stuff. That's not my job. My job is to plant seeds that set people free in the pursuit of personal sovereignty, meaning they make their own decisions, they make their own way in life, and they don't compromise those ways for convenience. We're men. We learn through action. We learn through lessons. We learn by going out into the world and trying something and then having to do it again or do it better, just like an apprenticeship, right? A good master will put his apprentice through something, allow them to fail. Don't scorn them for failing, but use it as an opportunity to teach them a better way. The reason that is such a beautiful activity is because that's how we're built. That's where men come from. We learn things that way. And so sovereignty has been compromised through all these conveniences, okay? So when we pursue sovereignty, and part of that is purpose and truth and love and understanding of ourselves, we're free to make those decisions and develop our masculinity in our own personal way. There's no model. You're not supposed to act like this guy. You're not supposed to look like that guy. You're not supposed to read this book or that book or watch this movie. None of that means anything. It has to do with the individual and how they choose to develop it. Do we offer guidelines? Of course we do. Do they learn from what other men have done in similar situations? Of course they do. But it's not about trying to produce an outcome. It's about empowering men to find it for themselves so that they can be sovereign, they can be free, and they can become the men that they want to be, that God put them on this planet to be.
Absolutely love that, because if you really look at it, or look at my hands, no two fingers on the same hand are of the same height. So what means something to another person is definitely not going to correlate to what another person is or is headed towards. So what you're saying is people just need to move and be who they're meant to be. And in the process, they now become a better version of who they're supposed to be. And that, my friend, is a beautiful place to be at. Now, how can people start experiencing this? Like, where can people go, or what's the next step that you would maybe want somebody who's watching this to take, especially if they're looking to find their true purpose and community?
Yeah, the very best way is just the-forge.life through our website. We're doing some rebranding right now, so things are going to look a little different, feel a little bit different as we move forward. But so the socials are going to change, but there's links to everything there. It's the very best way the very best way to reach out or reach out to me. My email is very simple, adam@theforge.life. You can reach out to me directly. I've got some staff and some people that help us. We actually have people in about 14 different time zones, but we're pretty well organized, and we usually do a really, really good job of responding and pointing people in the right direction when they need it.
Fantastic. Well, I will make sure that all those links are in the show notes. And if you update any of those, just be sure to send them our way, Adam, so that we can actually obviously lead people to the forge or to themselves, which is what I think you're actually doing. You're literally handing people back to themselves, because if you're
Yeah.
bringing people in and they're coming on a self-discovery journey and then they walk out knowing who they're supposed to be in the environment they're supposed to become, because looking at who you are, you're a dad, you're a husband, you're a brother, you're a son, and you're entrepreneur, you're a business owner. You've got all these people that you're supposed to be depending on who's looking at you, and that obviously, cannot be replicated because you're a unique individual yourself. So people need to then have that self-awareness to know who they're supposed to be at any particular moment. That's powerful, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. And it's needed now more than it's been needed in a very long time.
Absolutely. But with all that you've been telling me, your story sort of highlights the shift from a lot of striving or a lot of doing to just being. For a lot of people, obviously, that's very difficult to do. But what's been the one thing that you've probably stopped chasing, and how has that improved your life?
It's simple. I mean this. That's like the easiest question in the world to answer. I stopped trying to control the outcome. You, that's not up to me. What I do is I work as hard as I can, and I do the things I know to do. I listen to that voice in my heart as much as I can. Sometimes my brain gets in the way, but I realize at the end of the day I can't control the outcome. That this is not my world to control, and so I don't try. I stay focused on what I believe my purpose is. I stay focused on the intentions of my heart, and I work tirelessly in that direction. And I do it without compromise, but I also do it without trying to control the outcome.
Now, Adam, when we started this, you introduced us to a younger version of you that was an apprentice electrician, just obviously just trying to make his way in the world and everything else that then unfolded, along your journey. And if young Adam would have come across the Forge today and you would have maybe had a chance to have a chat with him, what's the one thing that you'd maybe just leave him with, knowing what you know about the world and who you've become now?
I would tell him that your grandpa used to tell you that everything happens for a reason, and that I need to take that as absolute, undeniable truth. I fought everything. I was very, very, very angry as a young man, and was very upset when the world didn't go my way, and therefore it rarely ever went my way. And that was not a healthy way to live. That probably took a few years off the other end of my life. But my grandpa used to say that, and I was too arrogant to allow myself to really understand it. And of course, he's gone now, so I don't have a second chance. But absolutely, things happen for a reason. What he was telling me is you can't control the outcome. Don't try. Trust that whatever happens is exactly what's supposed to happen.
Sorry to hear about Grams there, but we still have an opportunity to tell those that are still with us. And in this particular
Mm.
moment, Adam, I wanted to choose Michelle, who has been with you throughout all of this and, has assisted you with everything else that you guys have created and what you're going to be creating. If you had an opportunity to just say a few words to this lovely lady, what would you say to her? And
Um, I become emotional when I talk about my wife because she is the center of my entire world. I don't know why God chose to put her in my life. I can't imagine ever deserving it. But Michelle is the most kind, understanding, and yet savagely powerful and intelligent woman that I've ever even heard of. Am I biased? Absolutely. But she keeps up with me. She understands the things that we're trying to do. She's relentless. she she's she's just that person that we dream about when we truly get in touch with who we are. And for whatever reason, I found her, and even our story is miraculous, literally, how we found each other. But yeah, there's I couldn't do this stuff without her. And I wouldn't want to. She's amazing.
Congratulations. Congratulations, my man. And thank you so much for going there with us. But obviously, you've taken us on this journey. We now know where you've been. We now know what you're up to. What's next? What can people expect, Adam?
Well, one of the things that we've learned is we're constantly doing research within our own community. We're asking people. We have a whole program for how we accumulate this information. And one of the things we hear back consistently, time and time and time and time again, is people want to understand that when we go out and talk, right, or we have people into our home, or we do these things. People are like, yeah, Adam, sovereignty is awesome. I appreciate, the masculinity, but I want to be successful, right? Like I want to understand. And here's why. It's not greed, okay? What it is as a man, we want to provide. We get a huge peace of mind. We get a huge bit of solace from knowing that our families have the things they need, okay? I'm not talking about gluttony. I just mean providing the things that they need. And for a lot of people, that's a challenge to produce, like something huge percentage of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. But even for people who have money, are still constantly trying to secure that money and make sure that that's available. So the providing of the three masculine principles, right? Like provide, protect, and lead. Providing is what they tell us they're the most concerned about. So as this thing evolves, and we're actually even going to do a little bit of rebranding. That will be our focus. Is we're going to present to people, and actually part of this will be co-ed. So for the first time, we're going to have women invited as well and involved, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about, and in business right now as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you're well aware of this utility of artificial intelligence. It's like I predicted to be more impactful than like inventing the wheel, right? I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. I tell people, I said, the sky will be a different blue and water won't be wet in 5 years from now. That's the kind of impact that we're talking about, in my belief. And so we're going to incorporate that, and we're going to show people how that can be utilized, the things we've done in our life, so that they get specific access and specific direction to something that can really help them along the way and prosper. And we're going to mentor that, and we're going to do it through classes, and we're going to do it through live events, gatherings, live stream from our beautiful studio once it's completely done, and really speak to that end, because that's the peace of mind. And since that's what men want, we've also done a lot of research. We find out that's what women want, and so we're going to invite them into that. And we want men and women to be able to come together and see what we can do to share our experience, our wisdom, the things that we've done that have worked, the things that we've done that haven't worked, and incorporate some of this technology to make sure that they are as successful as we can possibly help them to be.
Wow. Now, Adam, I can't thank you enough, you enough for the time that we spent on the call today. I mean, your life story and your experience and all that you're now doing at the Forge have so much impact and value to the people that would have access to the work that you're doing. And I think on behalf of every other person that will have that opportunity, thank you, because I think you're doing God's work. If you're literally bringing back people back to themselves, when there's a lot more people that are hell-bent on making that separation with spirituality and everything else a common thing, man, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you. I thank you for having me on your show. Thanks for taking time. Truly, this was wonderful to experience this. It was wonderful to finally meet you. I've been going through all your stuff and kind of researching you since we first got connected, and it's wonderful to finally make it here and have a conversation and share some time with you.
Well, feeling is all mutual, my man. And for those that are watching, help me thank Adam once again, because this is a wrap. I mean, Adam has taken us on quite the journey from the literal power lines to the power of brotherhood and personal transformation. And I think if you're watching this right now, if today's episode has actually struck a chord or ignited something in you, I highly encourage you to check out The Forge and see how you can actually unlock your potential. I'll put all those links in the show notes below. And if maybe you want to go back again in segments of this episode, I think there's a lot that was unpacked that you might have just glozed over, or you would have missed out just because you wanted to hear the conclusion of it. Now that you've come to this part of the episode, I really encourage you to either rewatch this. If you grasped everything, share this with a brother, share this with somebody that might actually want to be more, do more, and have more in their life, and they don't quite know where to get started, because obviously the gift of wisdom is a gift that you can give to anybody else, and you can only just do it by simply sharing this video. And I can't thank you, Adam, enough. I'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes. Until next time, for those that are watching, just keep thriving, and remember, it's not just about success, but it's creating a life that's both profitable and actually enjoyable. Until next time, bye for now.